Hello and welcome to Business India with me Tarun, and Здравствуйте to our viewers in Russia. India-Russia military technical cooperation could see a boost with upgraded production of 100 T-90 tanks, 250 Sukhoi 30 MKI fighters, 200 Ka-226 helicopters, S-400 Triumph anti-aircraft missile systems, Tu-22 M3 long-range bombers, aircraft carrier project Storm, 2 nuclear-powered submarine class Akula, which the Indian military is keen to lease or purchase. But in the past years, India has diversified its defense procurement portfolio, which led to USA becoming a large supplier of military equipment to India. Some procurements by India, like the C-130 Super Hercules military transport from USA for $1 billion over Russia-made IL-76, led or raised discussion in India-Russia diplomatic circles. India recently terminated a $2 billion contract for 6 multi-role tanker transport with Airbus Defence over high cost issues. Speaking of facts, India makes up for 35% of Russian arms exports. Where this relationship is headed? To discuss the same, joining me on the discussion are Ambassador Ashok Sajanhar, Ambassador Skand Tayal and Lieutenant General Raj Kadian. I start with Ambassador Sajanhar for his opening comment on this relationship and this issue.
Defense is one of the most significant components of the bilateral partnership between India and Russia today, and of course as far as Soviet Union is concerned. There was a time when about 70% of our equipment with the defense services was of Soviet Union origin or Russian origin. Yes. And of late, as you have mentioned yourself, there have been more orders that have been going towards the West, not only as far as the United States is concerned, but also as far as France is concerned. We saw in the case of 126 multi-role combat aircraft, where the requirement was first put forward in 2004, but the decision was taken very recently that it went to the Rafale company in France. So we have seen that progressively there has been an attrition of orders that are coming in the way of Russia. And of course, next or along with the energy and commodities, Russia really depends upon its defense services. It has about, I think, 20% of its GDP is accounted for by the military industrial complex. Yes. There are more than 300,000 workers who are working in that particular complex. So this is not only as a matter of, and after the breakup of the Soviet Union, the domestic defense requirement has significantly come down. So the importance, relevance, significance of exports in that sense has increased.
An article written by you on this subject. Before that, I take opening comments. General Kadian, what's your opening comment on India-Russia defense relations and the way they are growing?
Our cooperation goes back, in fact, pre-partition. The Britishers suspected that India would fall into the Soviet camp. That time it was a bipolar world. And that may have been one of the reasons they divided India into two, hoping that Pakistan would at least remain with the Western powers. Stalin looked at with suspicion. He looked at Nehru being an imperialist who was educated in England, and same feeling continued. It's only after Nehru's historic visit to Soviet Union in 1955 that things changed. There was a great warmth. Then of course the relation went on. In 62, Soviet Union did not side with China, who was their staunch communist ally. In 71, they in fact were very active supporters by almost challenging the 7th Fleet that came into the Bay of Bengal and signing the 20 years friendship treaty with India. India, unfortunately, is the largest importer of military equipment in the world today. It continues. 1/7 of the total world military imports come to India. And this is a vast difference. Number 2 is China, which is 1/3 of us. So Modi's push in the last 2 years of Make in India, it has a long gestation period. Military equipment cannot be manufactured overnight. You need infrastructure, you need industry, you need cooperation from the civil producers. So hopefully in near future it will go. But yes, as Ambassador said, till 2005, Russia was our main supplier. But in the last 10 odd years, there has been a leaning towards other countries. Today, our main imports come from Russia, America, France, and Israel, and different kinds of equipment. Russia, of course, continues to be a staunch ally. There was a bit of a administrative problem after the Soviet Union broke up in 1991, because let's say a tank which we were importing, now the manufacturing base got diversified. The chassis was made in one country, the engine in another country, but all those were overcome. Russia continues to remain our staunch ally.
Okay.
Of course, there are now signs that Russia is warming up to Pakistan, but that may or may not affect our military relationship.
I take that as your
cooperation
opening
with-
comment. I'm going across to Ambassador Tayal. Ambassador Tayal, in my introduction, I spoke of 100 T-90 tags, 250 Sukhoi 30 MK upgradation. That's happening because the 5th generation fighter is yet to materialize, or the orders are yet to be given. Do you think that this relationship is only going to increase? Because anyways, we still dependent, 70% of our imports are Russian. Do you think this relationship is going strong, or is it changing?
The Indian armed forces are going through a very, very massive program of upgradation and modernization. And this is likely to continue. The estimates are that in the next 10 years, our total imports of defense equipment would be of the order of $250 billion.
Yes.
So it is a very large pie. And even if we import from other countries like United States or Israel or France, there will be still a lot which we will and we can import from
Because they
Russia.
form the backbone of our defense.
Because they form the backbone, and Indian, they are very familiar with working with these, and some of these are just upgradation of say Sukhois or tanks. About 1,000 tanks are being
Yes.
ordered. Second point which is very important to note is that Russia will give us technology which perhaps other countries will not give.
Yes.
Our nuclear submarine design of the reactor is a Russian design. The Russia gave one nuclear submarine on lease where our crew, our sailors, etc. could train
Yes.
so that they can now operate Arihant.
Yes.
Akula 2, there is another submarine, and no other country will easily will give a nuclear submarine on long lease. So there is an element of trust and there is an element of technology transfer. And the third thing is that the Russians are already in some way used to make in India.
Yes.
Because HAL, MIG, it may not be a very happy story,
Yes.
but still they have licensed their technology to India, whether it is of tanks, whether it is of planes and
That's
helicopters,
important. I'm
etc.
coming
also.
back to that topic, but I'm going across to Ambassador Sajanar. Now, you have mentioned in your article that defense is not only about selling defense equipment to a nation, it is also about strategic interests, and you have to have some commonalities. Do you see those commonalities in India and Russia, and how will they benefit us in the trade going strong? Because defense is not only about trade, it's also about geopolitics.
It is very much about geopolitics, you know, as whether we speak about energy or we speak about defense.
Yes.
You cannot really take politics out of it, and you cannot really take the international relations as they exist today. And I think our experience over the last several decades have proved to us that as far as India and earlier Soviet Union and now India and Russia, if we leave out the decade of the 90s, because that was the decade of transformation, and we didn't know you know, the changes that were taking place either in Russia or globally.
Yes.
But if you leave that aside, and as I said, 2000 we started this, so we signed the strategic partnership agreement. From there is such an identity
Yes.
and similarity of views between India and Russia
Yes.
on all major international global issues. Even if you take it the problem areas of today, or even where Russia has been involved, India has always been supportive and understanding of Russia's position, whether it was in Ukraine crisis, whether it was in Crimea. We did not agree to impose sanctions against them, or it is in Syria, its engagement in Syria. So that having been said, I think both our countries find that strategically and politically we are very much aligned with each other.
Okay.
And if that is the case, then we can go in for a long-term engagement. And what we have been talking about, and what General Qadian also mentioned, is that we look at the Make in India initiative that has been launched by Prime Minister Modi.
Yes.
So whether what in your opening remarks you had mentioned about the S-400 Triumph missile defense system, or it is the Kamo 226T helicopters, or it is progressive manufacture of tanks. Across the board, I think there are good possibilities, because again, as has been mentioned, India has been the largest importer of defense equipment.
Okay.
And we have really not been able to give a fillip, give a push to enhancing production and importing technology. You know, there is something known as the offset process, where by which we get, let us say, new technology, new methods into our country. We have not been able to do that.
Yes.
But I think Russia is the first country now that has
It's warming up to such an idea.
actively come forward.
Okay, I'm
to
going
take
to
this
cross to
forward.
General
Yes.
Kadian. General Kadian, two quick points from me I want to know. Is Indian armed forces very familiar with Russian equipment, and that also helps a lot in maintaining Russia's stature as a manufacturer of and you know, exporter of arms to India? And because the kind of orders that I read out in my opening comment on this show today, do you think that Russia maintains and will continue to be the largest supplier to India?
Yes, as I mentioned, after the Soviet Union disintegrated,
Yes.
there was a little administrative problem for some time, but now Putin is bringing Russia back almost to the same level as Soviet Union. We are familiar with their equipment. Their terms of payment have been favorable. They accepted payment in rupees at some stage in our imports. And also, there is a greater reliability that in time of need we can depend on Russia to continue the supply, which may not be the case in other countries. So far it hasn't been. And as the point was mentioned, geostrategic consideration, in fact they override everything, military supply.
General Kadian, there is a small comment since we are talking of this issue. Even as India is discussing the transfer of American technology for INS Vishal, Russia has offered its new multi-purpose carrier design called Project 23,000E, or STORM as they call it. The Karlov State Research Center, a St. Petersburg shipbuilding research and development institute, says its vessel has a displacement of up to 1 lakh or 100,000 tons, is 330 meters long, and will have nuclear or conventional propulsions. The question here is that they are ready to give us nuclear powered aircraft carriers. So do you think big business is already on?
Yes, you see, arms purchases are a big ticket purchases.
Yes.
India provides a very lucrative market to the arms manufacturers. So it's a question of competition. If the Americans make one offer, the Russians will try to better it. It's obvious.
No.
Without commenting on the specifics of the equipment that you mentioned, but it is a question of competition. We want the latest technology, we want the transfer of technology clause, we want easier terms of payment. So any country that meets that requirement, today India is hopefully open to both West and East.
Okay, I'm going across to Ambassador Tayal. Sir, I want your comments on two issues. First, the Trade Minister of Russia visited India last fortnight, held meetings in the DIPP. Dmitry Rogozin, the Deputy Prime Minister of Russia, also visited India last Saturday, held meetings with the Prime Minister of India, no less. Do you think, with so many orders also going on, a lot of business is already happening and will happen, how do you see this strategically? Is Russia now making overtures towards India to increase its procurement, showing that it has stood by India in times of need?
I think certainly, because now that we are in August, later in October there is BRICS meeting in Goa, then annual summit time will come. Last December, Prime Minister Modi had met President Putin in Moscow. So this is a time to take stock of what is going on and what are the possibilities, and apparently the core relationship still would be energy relationship and defense equipment relationship, and other sectors would be there, would be important, but perhaps minor. And these are all very long term projects, they are very long term investments, they have a long gestation period, they require a lot of support from the government side. And always it is good if there is a political push. So if the Russian Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister and Deputy Ministers, they meet the Prime Minister and our ministers, that it gives the necessary push, which is very essential for these things. And ultimately what technology we need, there would be competitors, and it is good for us as a buyer to have many competitors, so that we can get the best of terms. and again it will need to fit in our Make in India program, because it cannot be a situation that 100% of the platform we just continue to buy from abroad. So, whether technology of technology transfer would be allowed, and whether some kind of long term credit would be allowed.
We are going to discuss that too in a separate discussion. I am going across to Ambassador Sajjanar. Now, here are 2 points. There have always been issues of supply of spare parts, and they have actually taken also up at the diplomatic level, where we have bought huge equipment from Russia and spare parts became an issue. Do you think these issues need to be ironed out, since so many orders are now being given by India to Russia?
Yes, that is one issue that has at times bedeviled our relationship, and also when we have needed that equipment and we have needed the spares, then they have not been forthcoming. But this has to be a continuing process, and we have to take it up seriously with the Russian suppliers, because if you look at it, the certainty of supplies, that has also been a question mark as far as the Western suppliers are concerned. There is not that level of trust, there is not that level of confidence.
Yes.
And that is why Russia becomes a more preferred partner. But talking about this, when Mr. Rogozin is here, and as you know, Mr. Rogozin, he was one of the first foreign deputy prime minister, but foreign leaders to come after the new government came to power in 2014. He was here last year also. So, he is a regular visitor, and basically this speaks of the very keen interest as far as Russia is concerned to push forward the partnership. So, we need also to have, because this was mentioned earlier also in the program, that Russia has been warming up to Pakistan. They have agreed to supply them with Mi-35 Hindi helicopters for the first time ever.
So, that is a very important
point. For the first time ever, there was a visit of the Russian defense minister Sergei Shoigu to Pakistan last year.
Okay.
So, I think this is a new ground being broken, and we need really to have a very serious and a very frank, candid conversation with the Russian leadership on all these issues.
I will take it on from there and go to General Kadian. General Kadian, when you see this happening, how does it affect India, Russia defense and business relations? How do you see this happening, with they supplying arms or aeroplanes or strategic equipment to Pakistan, or do you think they will stop short of doing that? Do you think that is that a possibility?
So, you see, ultimately when we come to geopolitics, every country acts in his or her own interest. If the Russians are supposedly getting closer to Pakistan, well, we are also getting closer to the Americans.
Yes.
So, it is a foregone conclusion, but the Russian support in the world arena for India stays till today. They are still supporting our permanent membership of the United Nations Security Council, for example. So, I do not see any immediate negative impact, because our supplies from Russia are still in the pipeline. You cannot block them overnight, and they know if they go overboard in supplying to Pakistan, it will have a negative impact on India.
Okay, I think Mr. Sajjanar has a response. Ambassador Sajjanar, yes, you wanted to respond to what General Kadian said?
Very briefly, only to suggest that maybe there is no such a direct equivalence, that since we are going to the West, we are importing equipment from France and the United States. So, Russia also is, can go ahead and supply equipment too, because we know that any sort of attack helicopters or offensive equipment that is supplied to Pakistan, it will be used against India.
Yes.
That is not the case as far as our import of equipment that is concerned.
Okay.
And in the past, if you note, not only has Russia and Soviet Union not supplied equipment to Pakistan, but also the equipment that they supplied to China was always of a lesser sophistication than what was being supplied to India.
Is the fear of reverse engineering more troubling the Russians?
But also a difference to what India would, and India being their largest importing partner.
No, Ambassador Tayal, the question comes when you speak of defense supplies. India has been a market for the Russians for all these years. Now, as India is shifting its priorities and buying from the Americans, do you think there is a clear unease in Russia, or do you think because anyways Russian orders will be more, it makes no difference?
That is what we would like to tell Russia and convince them, that the orders are so much in volume and quantity and value that whatever their market in India was, that scale will continue even if we buy from other countries.
No, because sir,
like
I asked this
United
because
States.
there were 2-3 issues. When you talk of the 5th generation fighter, we
See,
considered
BrahMos
that-
has been very successful.
Yes.
So 5th generation, but I recently read some reports that their designers are not very happy with
yes,
the technical capability of our
Yes.
designers. Now
Yes.
that is a very, very serious issue, and we have to set
they,
our
they,
house
they,
in
they,
order.
they're talking the Rafale or the American Hornet F-18s are better than what Russia provides, is what is the talk. But do you think they say on some parameters the Russian aircraft was better, on some parameter the Americans were better, but eventually it went in favor of not Russia. Do you think all this affects the kind of relationship we have had?
See, ultimately the technical capability of any equipment which we buy would be important. Now in Turkey, the Turkish F-16 or what, they shot down the Russian plane.
Yes.
One should take
Yes.
that into account. So you have to have the best as far as fighters etc.
Okay.
are concerned, and compare the parameters. But the next generation, like BrahMos cruise missile,
Yes.
ultimately if we can develop the 5th generation fighter together
Yes.
and then have co-production,
Okay.
that is the way to go.
Okay, I'm going on for a round of closing comments. I'll start with Ambassador Sajanar. I want your closing comments on India-Russia defense relationship and how it progresses.
It is a very promising relationship, and I think it will continue to develop and continue to grow, because it is a win-win situation for both of them. Russia needs to export, and I think this support to the Make in India program of various
Yes.
platforms, whether it is tanks or it is helicopters or the other equipment, it is going to mesh our two countries, our two industries,
Yes.
our two defense forces very closely together.
Okay.
And that will be a further
Okay.
strengthening
as your,
of the strategic partnership.
I take that as your
between the two
General Qadian, your closing comment on this issue.
Despite their warmth towards Pakistan, the volume of trade, military trade with Russia is so high,
Yes.
and it will continue to remain. I mean, 14% of the world imports come to India, Pakistan only gets 3.5. So there cannot be any match. After all, even America in the past has been supplying to both the countries.
Yes.
To us, maybe in lesser degree, but they have been supplying. They also have been supplying to Pakistan.
Yes.
So I think, as Ambassador said, there is no risk of our relations souring or our trade going down drastically. Our trade will continue with Russia despite our diversifying
That's an
the
important
imports.
comment coming from General Qadian. Ambassador Tayal, your closing comment.
See, we have a special and privileged strategic partnership with Russia, and I am sure that they should be sensitive to their supplying and selling offensive arms to Pakistan. And otherwise, this relationship is on a very solid footing. It is comes from 30-40 years, and it has a very bright future.
Okay. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming forward with your inputs, suggestions, and also the kind of intellectual heft that you brought to this debate. Thank you so much for joining us on Business India discussion today. Thank you.